Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, where our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Please discuss any changes to your treatment plan with your personal healthcare provider before implementing.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Smith. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes care and education specialist with Integrated Diabetes, and we are going to chat today with my very good friend and colleague, Ginger Vieira. Hello. It's a special treat to be able to chat with you outside of just our normal conversations. So Ginger, tell us a little bit about you.
I've lived with type 1 for 25 years. I also have celiac and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And I have 2 kids who, of course, Jenny was my coach for pregnancy number 1. And then I got to write a book with Jenny during pregnancy number 2.
Which is kind of the topic of our
coaching that way
today.
Yeah,
absolutely. I know we had, during your first pregnancy, we had chatted about putting a book together.
I was taking notes for that book. Wow, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then I think both of our kiddos too were right around the time that we put the book out, correct?
Yeah, no.
17?
Those children, those kids were both born like a couple months before the book published. Because I remember being like, Jenny, if we don't get this done before these second kids arrive, it's never going to happen. I remember knowing that for sure.
Yep. I know. Yeah. Conan was born in 2017, January.
Okay.
And I think our book came out in March?
Yes, because Violet was born in May.
Yes. Yeah. It was go time. It was, we need to move right now. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and here it is for anybody watching. Pregnancy with type 1 diabetes. This is the second edition. So we have a brand new, beautiful cover that we're really excited about.
And lots of new things. I mean, and as we've said, our purpose in putting the book together really is because at the time, I mean, I had my first before you and realized very quickly that all the information that I had was because I was really looking it up myself. Not that I didn't have a good guiding MFM team or my, maternal fetal medicine OB team. They were great, but they just, like you found, they just didn't have all the answers that were the day-to-day things that you experience.
I mean, I got 0 actual diabetes I wouldn't even go to, I don't even know what it would have been like if I had to actually depend on those people for actual diabetes management. I don't remember what kind of led me to how I think I had already worked with you prior to pregnancy on other diabetes things. Yeah. And so then I knew I wanted to hire you because I also didn't have an endocrinologist I trusted or liked at all.
Yes, I do recall that.
Yeah.
You were kind of floundering for somebody who could, I mean, you're very knowledgeable with all the experience that you have in exercise and managing that way, and having lived with diabetes a long time already. It's not like you didn't have a base.
Sure. Right.
And beyond even that base, right?
Yeah.
But to have somebody on your team, so to speak.
I mean, otherwise I would have had no real diabetes support beyond that OB team. Right. And I do remember also when we were writing the book, we approached some of the leading organizations, diabetes organizations, said, would you want to publish this? And they all said, no, that audience is too small to bother publishing a book for. And that
they did say that it was needed.
Yeah.
They said it was a highly needed.
Yeah. Critical, but not worth it.
But not worth it from a monetary standpoint, because again, our audience was too small, unfortunately, which I don't believe is the case. I think it's truly that the audience is small because people are already a little bit behind from what I've found in just as your frustration with trying to find an endocrinologist who could actually meet you where you were in understanding of your diabetes management. I think there are a lot of people like that also then may not know what they're missing. And so then they just move along navigating with the care team that they've got because that's all that they think is really needed. And that's unfortunate because, again, audience wise, we might have a small population, but I think within that population, there are enough people who don't understand diabetes. And then when you move into working diabetes along with a pregnancy, it becomes even more stressful, difficult, frustrating. There are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most challenging thing a woman with type 1 could decide to do. It's scary because you're like, it's not, now your blood sugars impact this growing little creature and their daily safety and your daily safety. And one thing that I really remember realizing the most during my pregnancies is just you do not know how your body is going to respond to pregnancy until you're pregnant. And every phase of pregnancy and delivery is different. And just because you might be super healthy or super fit, or you've never had some kind of complication related to anything in your life, pregnancy is a stress test that your body has never gone under before,
Yeah. And that's why I think, when we started putting together and you were making all of your wonderful notes about everything through your pregnancies in the idea to put a book together, that's something that we emphasize and talk a lot about. This may be a starting point. This is what to look for, or within this time frame of pregnancy. And that's why we go through by month to month within each of the trimesters to be able to say, these are the things that you could see happening. It may not be 100% this way for you. We are
right.
all different, right?
Yeah.
But knowing that this is what is supposed to be happening during this time of pregnancy. And I think that it holds value, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of doctors, they may look at your numbers, they may look at your glucose charts, and they may look at the amounts of insulin that you're using and maybe give you small pointers in that realm. But it leaves the woman wondering, is this what's supposed to be happening?
Yeah, I've gotten messages from women, or I've seen posts from women who, don't have our book and don't have you as a coach. And they say, oh, I had constant daily lows during my first trimester. It was so crazy. And no one said to them, hey, that's normal, but also that's a sign that you need to adjust your insulin doses. You shouldn't, right? And they don't have that education support. And that's just so scary that they're just enduring crazy lows for 2 months,
without either no one adjusting correctly, which I find an awful lot, unfortunately, where one piece of insulin is adjusted, but others are left out. But it goes beyond just insulin. It goes into more of the structure of their day. And then where again are they in their pregnancy? Should this be a more sensitive time? Are you coming into more resistance? Is it normal for things to be dropping off or escalating? How are you feeling? How are you eating? Like all of these pieces that they sort of get the personal, I guess, the human piece gets left out.
Yeah, the real life, day to day.
Yeah.
This is how to navigate this. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So yeah, I mean, it was super exciting to have all of your diary. I think that's what I hear a lot of people comment about is your diary.
Really?
Honestly, just the fact of your feelings went into each of those pieces.
Yeah, and when I look at them now, like when we were doing the second edition, like part of me desperately wanted to rewrite it because I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound ridiculous. But I'm like, nope, that was my diary. That was genuinely how I felt, and that was genuinely what was going on. Don't touch it. And aside from correcting a few typos, I did not change a thing because that is the real experience. And that's what's helpful, right?
It is. And that actually, the piece that I took from that idea of putting a diary together goes into when I talk with women and get the opportunity to work individually with somebody. It's a diary of potential future use too. Right? The ability to have not only your feelings, but also, hey, I know last pregnancy, I adjusted by this much at this point in my pregnancy. I know what to potentially expect coming. And it makes, if you're planning another child, it makes that a little less scary because you have almost a plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a whole new set of confidence. I mean, with my second pregnancy, I didn't even, you have this whole other kid already here. You can't obsess in the same way. And I know my A1C was roughly the same, but I know that the amount of mental energy I was putting into it was very different. And it was just it was more like, I'm going to do the best I can and I'm not going to freak out about this,
But and that's another good point about like the freaking out. Part of it I think and we talk a lot about that in the book is there's not going to be a flat line. There's not going to be 100% perfect. And you have to know that what we're aiming for is the big picture of management, and the one time that your blood sugar is 180, 200, it's not overall the biggest piece that's going to make the difference. Instead, it's the broad picture of, well, you're not sitting at 200 for 5 days in a row. It was a blip. It is what it
Yeah.
is. You took care of it,
Yeah.
those pieces. And then second pregnancy, you can say, okay, I did this successfully. Yes, this is what happened. And with managing yourself and another little person, there's more on the table. You might actually have a similar A1C, but maybe now there's a little bit more variability to it
Yeah.
because you're not just able to manage you.
Right. No, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think those nuances come in whenever you have a learned experience and realize I had success in this and I could do this again, or I can do it again, right?
And that being said, like my second pregnancy was fraught with weird complications that had nothing to do with diabetes. I was terribly sick starting month 4. Basically, my stomach started producing an ungodly amount of stomach acid, and it made me puke every time I ate. And so I had to avoid certain foods that, like even just tomatoes or anything with any degree of acid. I couldn't handle even the slightest bit of like a French fry. No way. Like, and then in my last 2 months, I really am certain I was in preeclampsia, especially the last month. But like the second to last month, I was easing my way into it. The last month, I was in preeclampsia, but my healthcare team said everything was fine on paper because I have low blood pressure to start. So my blood pressure was never high. I was still within normal. But my feet, I was gaining a half a pound of fluid a day in my feet. My feet were so swollen in the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy that like my
I
skin
remember
was
talking
bursting.
with you. I remember texting with you at that point of your concern and worry and that they weren't
Yeah.
addressing it.
I was on the edge of tears all day, every day. I felt like my body was shutting down. And my husband would come home from work and I would just burst into tears. I was hanging on by a thread trying to take care of my 2-year-old. And I did go to the hospital and I was like, something's not right. And this woman who got heavily reprimanded, she apparently has a terrible reputation. But when you go into OB teams, you get whoever's there that day.
On rotation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
She was awful. And she looked at me and I was in tears. I was like, something's not right. But again, everything was right on paper. I looked completely fine. And she's like, well, we understand you're feeling emotional, but it's our job to do what's best for the baby. And I was like, I'm trying to do what's best for the baby. Something's not right. And finally,
Right.
one of them, the kind of head of the team, sat with me and he listened to me. And I was like, listen, I just published this book. Like, I know
I
my
know what you're talking
diabetes.
about.
I know my health. Yeah. And he looked at it and he started to take me seriously. And it shouldn't take that, right? That shouldn't be necessary. But he said, we will do a test on the baby's lungs by doing this like long needle through your abdomen into the uterus. Somehow they get the fluid. And if her lungs are fully developed, we'll do a C-section 3 days early. Like they'd already waited way too long. But I am certain that if they had waited longer, I would have been having an emergency C-section instead of a really peaceful, calm C-section. Because a week after she was born, I nearly bled to death in bed, taking a nap with her at home. We'd just gotten back from the hospital and I woke up, blood was pouring from my body. I was hemorrhaging. And they later determined that my uterus was would have never been capable of a contraction and that it wasn't doing any of the postpartum contracting it's supposed to do to manage
heal itself.
bleeding. Yeah. And I was just filling up with blood clots until it finally burst. And I lost enough blood to need a blood transfusion, but my blood pressure was high enough that they didn't do one.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, this is crazy.
Well, I think the big thing out of that is you really have to learn, again, put your big girl pants on, put your
Yeah.
feet down, and honestly say something's not right. I need to talk to another person. I need to talk to somebody higher up than you. Call in, specialty, even if it's waved away by them then as nothing really is a concern. you kind of have to almost like seat yourself there and be very vocal, because otherwise you may not get heard. And I'm honestly surprised in what you were feeling like, that they hadn't done more than just looking at your swelling and your blood pressure. I mean, there are other tests that can be done from an evaluation for preeclampsia that should have honestly been done to disprove what you thought was going on, right?
No, I
And
was dismissed heavily. Yeah.
yeah, their job is to do all of the tests
Yeah.
necessary. Yeah.
And, in the ultrasounds, Violet looked happy in there. She didn't look stressed out. But yeah, so I was dismissed heavily. And
So they told you had a happy looking little
yeah.
infant
And
inside.
I mean, I still just remember those last 2 weeks of just being at home, just struggling to I feel like my body is trying to shut down. And I do feel like it was giving everything it could to Violet. And so there was very little left for me. Yeah. And I'm glad it did that. Violet was born. She's happy as a clam.
Yes.
She's been operating at 1,000% ever since. And we're all coping with the aftermath of that.
And the other thing that it also brings up is, I've long felt that people with diabetes have an internal, almost like that sixth sense, right?
Yes, because we have to.
We have to know something is off.
Yeah, we are more in tune with every single thing in our body than a non-diabetic, because that's how we survive the day.
Yep. Even getting sick, many people can tell, because we use that wonderful device now, that the CGM, right? And many people can tell even before they're having symptoms of a cold or respiratory illness or something like that. My blood sugar is high. It shouldn't be high. I've changed my insulin. I've taken more insulin. I've changed my pump site or whatever it is, and it's still high. And then 2 or 3 days later, which that 48 to 72 hour lead into really getting symptomatic. Oh, now I'm blowing my nose all the time. Clearly I was getting sick. But those are things that you learn, again, 25, and now I've had diabetes for 37 years. I mean, honestly, these are things that you pile up at, and you file away for when needed. You pull the file drawer out, say this isn't right.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So long story short is, no two pregnancies are the same.
No.
And I think, speak up for yourself.
And speak up for yourself. But again, the value to why we actually also did a second edition is that things in diabetes, in the world of diabetes, they change. And in the past 10 years, they have changed very much. They've changed over and over, even on year-to-year basis. We're turning over technology. We're advancing that technology. The technology is getting more useful. I don't like using the word smart, because they aren't really, it's not thinking technology yet. So I don't like to use the word smart, because it's not really truly learning anything.
Yeah.
But with technology that can do more, I think we, the person with diabetes, we get smarter about navigating the variables. And because our technology can now meet us with what it can do when we tell it to, it can be a huge value. So one of the best sections that I feel really proud that we added to the book is all about the newer technology, the AID technology, or the automated insulin delivery stuff. It has and holds so much value for those who choose to use technology. I'm working with a couple of women right now who are using multiple daily injections, just like you did, and have for a really long time. And it can work both ways.
Yep.
Absolutely.
If you're willing to take all the injections, it can work just fine.
That's right. I know. I remember when we were working together in your first pregnancy. I think it was like 16 to 20 injections a day sometimes, depending on what you were seeing happening, and little nudges that you had to give to things because, oh, this blip up. I know if I don't correct it and I can't get out for a walk right now, I need to manage it, right?
Right. And if you're not willing to stop and take a smidge of insulin, I was drawing it up in the syringe, and
right.
It wasn't even a unit. It wasn't even a half unit. It's just a smidge. If you're not willing to do that, you probably want to be on a pump.
Correct. And again, today's pumps that do deliver, especially if you're able to use them pretty much automated the full pregnancy, and some women can and some women can't. But if you can, those little smidges that you were giving could be automatically being delivered by the pump, depending on which system you're using, and how it's set up for it to work for you. And the other thing that I like that we did is we did some of the out of the box thinking about using the technology, because unfortunately, even eons ago, the baseline of education coming from a true brick and mortar kind of clinical practice is this is what's in the box that says to do. This is how you're going to use it. And we know with diabetes that there is a lot of out of the box gray area thinking that goes into managing all of the variables. And then when you pile in pregnancy on top of that, we have to pull tools out that maybe you would never use. Maybe with a pump, we also use an injected kind of insulin. Normally, somebody wouldn't really do that. But
Yeah.
there are all these little pieces that can be done.
Yeah.
But many practices
I'm going to teach that. No.
they're not going to teach that. In fact, I just had a really interesting conversation with a physician on the West Coast who they are using in their practice Afrezza during pregnancy.
All right. Yeah. I didn't have that when I was pregnant, but I can only imagine what that would have done for my pregnancy. Yeah.
And it's not approved, right?
No.
Because nobody's really doing
They're not going to study it. They don't have the money to put into that. Yeah.
Right. And it's the concern of what class or what category inhaled, which for those of you who don't know, Afrezza is an inhaled insulin, right? So we don't inject it. It goes into our lungs. It gets absorbed very evenly and very quickly through your little alveoli kind of in the lungs, right? You use Afrezza already.
I do.
So
I love
you know what it does. But in pregnancy, I mean, whether it's gestational or type 1 or type 2 diabetes, there's a gigantic benefit to being able to address so many of the things that someone might experience during their pregnancy.
Yeah.
That it could fix faster than our current even technology or injections can do.
Word from our sponsor. Byram Healthcare understands that managing diabetes isn't one size fits all. With a full range of CGMs, insulin pumps, and diabetes supplies from top brands, Byram makes it easy to get what you need, hassle-free, shipped right to your door. And Byram's team of experts helps navigate insurance so you can focus on living your best life. Ready for better diabetes care? Visit byramhealthcare.com/podcast or call 866-692-8024 and select option 3. And now, back to our program.
Driving me crazy.
A peek of our first book on your back shelf.
Oh yeah,
it's
back there.
Purple book. It's back there. Yeah. But I think, in terms of what you could expect, we've added a number of other things. We've added a whole section on different medications. And again,
yes, because that was not a thing back during the first edition of this book. So we talk about GLP-1s. And Jenny, do you have a question on that? Because I have several friends with type 1 who took a GLP-1 to prepare for their wedding to help with the weight gain that they've experienced, stubborn insulin resistance, and et cetera, when they were diagnosed in their 20s.
Okay.
And they lost that weight that they were really frustrated with. And then they eventually want to start planning for pregnancy and have to go off the GLP-1 and then gain a lot of weight. Yeah. Are they going to change that recommendation?
They're doing studies
to
evaluate. There's one study that I'm aware of. There may be more at this point. In fact, I think it's a study that we put the link to in our book about, it came from a study in type 2 population. And it studied the women essentially who had still used during at least the first trimester a GLP, not defined by any brand, just a GLP-1. And what they looked at then was kind of outcome of not only the pregnancy, but also was the baby born with any issues. I can't remember how long they followed the kids post delivery, because GLP-1s, despite them being very, very popular now, they've been on the market in other forms, still injectable, for a really long time. But those versions, unfortunately, just didn't have the strength, that oomph behind them that our current day GLP-1s have. They were beneficial, but not like what we have. So that study in pregnancy, they're really not only looking at pregnancy, but they're also looking at even GLP-1 for true approval in type 1s.
Yes.
But
is it only in type 1s living with obesity, or is it going to be all type 1? I guess it'll open the gateway.
It'll open the gateway, essentially, because I think that there's a lot we don't know, honestly, about metabolism and how things shift when we live with an autoimmune condition and we have to manage our own insulin, because there are
And all
other
the
things
other hormones
and
that
all
are
the other hormones.
affected. Yeah.
Correct.
I
I
take a
mean,
micro dose of a GLP-1 now, and it's just so helpful. And I don't use it for weight loss, but
no,
it's
yeah,
life-changing. Yeah.
it is. And so hopefully there's going to be enough information and data that can be put together for its sustained use throughout pregnancy, because there is, as you were getting to, before we're talking here, it's, well, what do you do about that? I've prepared so well. I've gotten to a point of having really now tightened my diabetes management because this
Yeah.
medication helped me, and my weight loss, it helped with that.
Yeah. And then right when you're trying to get pregnant or you are pregnant, you have to go off the medication. Then your weight starts climbing. Your insulin needs are completely changing just from that. And you're trying to figure out pregnant. I mean, it's just kind of cruel.
It is. And some of the, the many pregnancy, like how you feel in early pregnancy too, all of those kinds of things, food aversions and whatnot, we very much know that the GLP-1s have an impact on how your brain starts to relearn how to think about food. A lot of people say that food noise, or it's
Yeah.
kind
It
of
goes
gone.
away.
It goes
Yeah.
away, right?
Gone. Yep.
And I've even heard from a number of people who didn't realize how strong it was
Yeah.
until they start, like, they felt like they had really good management and navigation of food, and it wasn't that they could feel the draw, but once they started using the medication, they could tell that there was something like a switch that flips off.
Yeah, don't even get me started. We'll end up on a
No,
GLP-1 topic here, but
it's
yeah,
all,
it's amazing. It's
it
amazing.
is. But
Yeah.
you're right in questioning, as a lot of people do. And we had to say, obviously, in the book right now, it's not approved, but nothing in our book is medical advice. It is, right?
It's a book.
It's
a
a
little
book about pregnancy with
support.
type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
Yes, for support, with lots and lots of good information about how things should be managed. But I think I'd be curious how many people are using a GLP-1 right now and have continued to utilize one, whether with or without their doctor's continued support.
Okay.
Right. And I question that mainly because, again, having talked to this wonderful doctor about just Afrezza and the fact of realizing the numerous benefits when you're looking at all the pieces that you have to manage in pregnancy with diabetes, and transferring that over to another medication like this, that, gosh, we see all of the benefits.
Yeah.
And we see the struggle. I mean, what's a main worry in pregnancy with diabetes?
High blood sugar after eating.
Right. High blood sugars, or high blood sugars after eating, or managing around eating. And it becomes harder and harder and harder as you move through each of the
And
trimesters
insulin
of pregnancy.
sensitivity, or combating insulin resistance.
And it's the timing of the insulin, and it's all of those things. And not only now you don't use 1.5 units, you're using 5 units of insulin. And for those using pump sites, it becomes a strategy of, is the pump site oversaturated? Because now my doses are like 70 units a day versus they used to be 25 units a day. And
Yeah.
you've done everything to manage. It's not like you're sitting down and eating 3 chocolate cakes a day. It's your body's hormone action
Yeah.
working against you. And it's not,
I'm going to take a dose of Afrezza right now, actually.
you go right ahead. Yay.
My morning little spike is
Post breakfast navigation.
Now, I haven't had breakfast. This is because I skip breakfast because I practice intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
It's around this time. I already took a little half unit of Novolog an hour ago, but it's not enough.
Yay.
There you go.
Easy.
That was it.
Yeah. That's it.
And by the way, I did that with one hand because my other hand is holding my computer so that
the
fan
buzzing
click
doesn't-
noise stops. Yeah. One-handed insulin dose. That's right.
That's pretty fancy. Yeah. And you don't have any of the, I mean, obviously you did it. You don't even have a cough.
Right.
That's the
You
one
watched
thing a
it.
lot of people complain about is kind of a cough, which I also understand that most people get over that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I found tricks around it, like taking some water.
Drink some water.
Drink some water after, kind of.
If I have a sore throat for other reasons, like if I'm sick, Afrezza can be very difficult to take. Like if my throat is really hurting, it's like painful to take. It's like, stick with injections as much as possible today, Yeah. But that's pretty rare.
And I like the in and out effect of it. Like it really has a very quick, and then it's kind of gone again, benefit in pregnancy.
Don't even get me started, Jenny.
Dosing very
frequently. Amazing. Yeah.
Amazing in and out. And if you have your basals quite well set, whether using
Mhm.
injected basal or using a pump that you've tested your rates and your settings and everything, utilizing that and allowing it to finish off, and then the basal just takes over.
And then you go on a walk with 3 dogs and you don't worry about lows.
Or
Not
4
one bit.
today.
Yep, 4.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think the value of what we put together in terms of the book has a lot of value in for those who have. I know we've gotten a lot of comments back from people.
Yeah, well, and not everybody can afford to have Jenny
That's true.
every week with them. So that's really what we wanted, is a book that you could have with you that's not like having Jenny with you, but it's as close as you're going to get, right? Yeah. Because you're not going to get what Jenny can give you from the average OB.
No.
Or even the average endocrinologist.
And I will, that's a really good point to make too, because I think some people feel as though if they're in a good, large enough area, a big enough city with valuable endocrine or high risk types of practices, gosh, I should be able to get everything that I need. These should be the highest educated compared to the middle of nowhere somewhere, right? And I've not found that to be true. I've found practices that are or should be, they're well known. They have many accolades, from many different places. They've got really quality practitioners on their team. And unfortunately, some of the places still seem to give the black and white. This is what it should be. This is where your targets are.
Yeah.
They don't understand. They're not, I don't know if they don't understand or they're not willing to get down to that human level of discussion about diabetes and management.
I mean, we know that most of us prefer diabetes educators or endocrinologists who also have diabetes themselves. So you take it to the next level. You're the next level of subspecialty. You're the diabetes educator who has type 1, who has been through pregnancy. And it adds that real life understanding that you don't know it if you've never been through it.
That's exactly right. I know. And we've both had C-section. So that's another piece that, in terms of question, a lot of women say, well, I hear that people with diabetes often end up having a C-section anyway. So why should I plan? When I work with somebody personally, and I know that we went through it in the book too. In fact, I think this book, we put together the typical plan for going in for labor and delivery, to have an idea of a plan of action to discuss with your care team before you go in. So, what is their protocol and what are you going to do for your diabetes management? And it adds just that talk point. I put together something similar, but I think something that's really important to go over is that just because you have diabetes doesn't mean you're going to have a C-section.
No. Yeah.
It doesn't. And just because you have diabetes doesn't mean that you have to be induced, right? There are practices that are very willing to continue to look at, how are you managing? What's the baby's health? What does the health of the placenta look like? Are there any signs of placental failure? Are you having excessive swelling? Those signs for, issues that come much later or closer to the delivery time.
Yeah.
And those practices, they look at the real pieces and say, well, you're doing really well. The baby's doing really
good.
Everything looks great. Why would we induce? Most practices do have kind of a hard stop somewhere between 39 and 40 weeks where they say, we'll give you to this point and then we really should be inducing. But then there are other practices who do a lot more scare tactic, and that's frustrating. It's, and they go the scare tactic route of things like stillbirth. And like, the longer you wait, the more likely you are to have a stillbirth because you have diabetes. But the statistics, to my knowledge, that they're using for that, they really come from using not only old information, but information that is relative to people who didn't have well managed
Whose A1Cs were high, and
during their pregnancy.
Because it's also old information that didn't have today's technology. It's just it's so kind of
exactly
so outdated, it's useless.
What needs to be brought together is women like I have the privilege of helping manage, or those who maybe had a resource like our book to manage on their own, and they really did
and look at the rates job there. Yeah,
look at the rates there.
Yeah.
What is their outcome compared to those who
Yeah.
didn't have that extra hand holding? And then make a judgment call to pass off. Don't just use a scare tactic.
Yeah. And our reasons for needing C-sections are so different. They tried to induce me at 39 weeks. I had one quasi sort of contraction. I was like, oh, yeah, I think that was a contraction. But I later discovered, thanks to my second pregnancy bleeding to death, that I really don't think my uterus is capable of contracting. Yeah. And so 2 C-sections were in my future no matter what.
Have
And
you caught
honestly,
any? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm fine with it. I have a friend who's delivered vaginally and she's got a lot of issues. Besides a scar and some funky skin, I don't have any issues because I didn't deliver vaginally.
Right. Yeah.
It's all a trade-off of one thing or another.
And what are we aiming for, especially in a pregnancy with diabetes, where you are so tightly managing almost everything that you're doing? What's the end goal? The end goal is a healthy baby that you're bringing into your family.
And a healthy mama at the
And a
end.
healthy
Like
mom.
a mother who's alive and a baby who's alive and safe. Yeah.
And safe and healthy. And
Yeah.
the way that the baby comes into the world, it's a piece of the story, but it's
Yeah.
it's
no, I've never done it vaginally, but it still felt pretty crazy, amazing, special.
It was.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you still meet your baby. They still lay it on top of your chest and you're like, oh my God,
Yep.
So yeah.
I know one of the things that my boys really like to do on their birthday is they like to get their baby album out, like just their first year, which has their birthday, right? And we tell them the story of how they were born,
Oh, cute.
everything that, in the hospital, who came to visit them, and then, all of that kind of stuff. So it's still a wonderful memory of them coming into our life. So yeah, and I had a very different reason. I mean, they essentially, after having managed really, really, really well over the course of my whole first pregnancy, 3 days, I had a great practice that I worked with. I really enjoyed my MFM team. And about 3 days before I was scheduled to potentially have an induction, because I hadn't gone into labor yet, they did that final sort of evaluation, growth scan. And they were like, I don't know, your baby's really big all of a sudden.
Oh, that's right.
And I was like, what do you mean? The baby? And we didn't know whether it was a boy or girl because we didn't want to know. And so they're saying, big baby. They were averaging, he was going to be 10 and a half pounds. I was like, no. We need another person in here. I was angry, really angry at that point. And even the MFM came in. She's like, well, I'm measuring kind of at least similar enough. She said, yes, these scans can be, upwards of 20% off. But she said the way that we're able to measure at this point, it does look. So I'm really encouraging. I mean, I'm not a big person, neither are you. And she's like, I don't really think that even if we did induce right now, nothing's looking like we couldn't do that. But she's like, size wise, I'm really encouraging you to have a C-section. And so that's what we did. I mean, I was bawling. I was just so upset. And my husband was really the one who said, you've worked really hard. As we just said, this is the way that the baby is going to be with us. And I mean, sure, it made me feel a little bit better, but I was still really annoyed and bothered and frustrated and all of a sudden angry at myself. What did I not do right? And then he was born and he was 8.5 pounds. Yeah. So as with a first C-section, you either go into labor naturally with a second. Most practices won't do any induction if you've had a C-section for risk of hemorrhage. I've encountered a couple that have been willing to do a balloon dilation kind of to get things going or whatever, but most won't do an induction.
And so, that reminds me, I was on Pitocin for 2.5 days and I was 0% dilated. Yeah. It was brutal. So I would never do Pitocin again. Yeah, I had no reaction to it.
No reaction. Yeah, so
except swelling and misery, but yeah.
Misery. Not the way that you want that to go at all. You're like, I'm here to have a baby and have a lovely day.
Yeah, I felt pretty sick by the time she was delivered via C-section, the first baby, because I'd been on Pitocin for so long. It was too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, both of us had sort of scheduled C-sections for second then. I mean, they were giving it as long as they could, obviously, for the potential of it actually going to labor.
And do you feel like clinically they should have just given you a chance to try delivering him?
I do at this point, still harboring some desire to have had that chance.
Yeah.
But again, there's been so much post baby, right? There's so much the
Yeah,
delight of like the
it's
growing and
that's
it's
one moment. Well, I'll tell you, my mother, who's 5'4", she's teeny. She has to lie in order to donate blood about her weight because she doesn't even qualify for the weight limit. One of my brothers was like 13 pounds when he was born.
holy cow,
Yeah, and she delivered him vaginally.
naturally.
So they shouldn't do that. You know, the female body is designed normally. Mine's not designed to give birth, but other people's are. They shouldn't let you try, I think.
Well, and I had two very healthy, normal weight babies, right? That were
Mine were in the 8s as well, and they, because of my size, they're telling me, "Oh, those babies are big." And my mom, all my mom's kids were very large. I was a month early as a twin, and I was 6.5 pounds, which
and
is
was your
pretty
brother
big.
about the same size?
Yeah,
Or
he was
had
like a few
oh,
ounces bigger. Yeah.
okay.
And, so like maybe this is just what my babies weigh. Why do you have to say it's because of my diabetes? It's just annoying.
Right. And they even my MFM with my first was astounded that they were so wrong in measurement. But all along she said, I would never have guessed, even if he had been as big, I would have never have guessed that it was relative to your diabetes because of the way that you managed. And not
Sure.
only looking at, I mean, they actually did beyond A1C, they did something called a fructosamine as well, which is it's not tied to your red blood cells, and which in pregnancy the A1C can be off and it can be misleading. It can be lower than it truly honestly is bodily. And so they would do a fructosamine to get closer, and even that was well within the range that it was supposed to be. It was in, the non-diabetes
Yeah.
specific kind of range, which
Yeah, you're
proves
Jenny
the case.
Smith. I'm sure I remember you were trying to convince me that I should eat take a yogurt, a lemon yogurt, put it in the freezer and pretend it was ice cream. I'm like, Jenny, I am not
I'm
doing
gonna
it.
eat ice cream.
Yeah.
Just dose for it.
Yeah, that's what Jenny was doing. So I'm sure your blood sugars were just fine.
They were
Yeah.
just fine. They
Yeah.
really were. But
Well, I had friends of mine were giving birth to their babies, like friends from high school, in the years after mine were born, and their babies weighed the same weight mine did, but they weren't told those were big babies. This is just what babies weigh.
right.
Yeah.
I know we have a friend whose baby was 9 pounds 13 ounces, no diabetes. She did not have gestational diabetes, totally healthy pregnancy, just had a really big baby. So I don't know. There are
No,
very gray areas in
annoying.
that are very
Yeah.
frustrating. And having worked prior to working for Integrated, I've also worked previously in clinical, like outpatient, where I've also seen women who, despite trying to manage blood sugar really well and having higher than desired blood sugars, have had teeny, so growth restricted babies could also happen with mismanaged diabetes during a pregnancy. So it's, there are multiple pieces that could not be right, but then there are also things for women who don't have any diabetes or known
Yeah.
health
And
issues, who have kids who've got things that aren't right either.
right. It's like there's so much out of your control, so you have to really keep that in mind as you approach, well, delivery day, obviously, but also even just every month before, like.
Right.
And I mean, we still joke today. Violet thinks it's hilarious. We say, like, yeah, Lucy was such a good baby. She didn't give me a lot of trouble when she was in my belly. And Violet started trying to kill me around month 4. That's how we describe it. And we all laugh.
And now she's still your spirited little
Yeah,
bud,
she's
right?
she has mellowed out. She was a ping pong ball for like the first 6 years, and she's more focused now.
More focused,
Yeah.
more energy, and
She can focus on tasks for more than 20
some
seconds now. It's
places.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, and it is pretty amazing all the things that in life, no matter how long you've had diabetes before you choose to have a child, there are learning pieces that you kind of take with you into pregnancy.
Yeah.
For managing well, and even things that you learn, well, I guess I was navigating this not quite in the right way. It looked okay, but now that I'm pregnant, gosh, I can really tell that it probably wasn't the greatest thing for me to be doing, and you can kind of clean some things up, and sometimes those then end up sticking with you beyond pregnancy too.
For sure. I mean, before I started thinking about pregnancy, my A1C was in the high 6s. I hadn't really gotten a CGM yet. And so I got a CGM in preparation for pregnancy. And I mean, what I learned in preparing for pregnancy and then managing during pregnancy changed everything about how I manage diabetes today. And it made, I manage those same pregnancy A1C levels every month.
Since.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
And so
Yep.
it's a massive learning opportunity that, yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are even some things I remember you even tried going to an insulin pump
For 1 month.
prior to pregnancy because you were like, okay, I'll give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
I really am hoping that it's gonna give me the bit more
Mm-hmm.
that I might
And that
need
I
in
wouldn't
pregnancy.
hate it.
And then you were like, no. I think you texted me like, I'm ripping this thing off.
Yeah.
Like I can't do this anymore.
My husband, my then husband, he was like, wow, you're really liking this. And because I liked it for about a week and a half. And then for about 2.5 weeks, I was like, ugh. And then that last little stretch, I was like, no, I am not doing this.
I
This is
must remove
exactly
this.
what I hate about all pumps and pods, and I'm done. Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
And you, again,
Again,
it's
it's
okay.
okay.
You learn to navigate and you learn to manage, and you knew that you were taking on something that you had experience with, but that it was going to be kind of amplified
Yeah.
in what you
I'd
were
already
doing.
gotten my A1C down under 6 on MDI. I knew I could do it. And
Right.
I mean, honestly, like, yeah, I'm way more lax in how I manage today than when I'm pregnant because I just don't give a shit to that extent. But my A1C still comes out to be basically under 6 every time. So,
Yeah.
it's just, it's funny.
Yeah. I think there are things that you travel that travel with you too in how you help your kids navigate things
Mm-hmm.
because of the learning that you put into your own self care and ultimately
Mm.
their care,
Yeah.
once they're inside, that kind of go forward in what you teach them how to do. I know I've taught my kids a heck of a lot about just nutrition and being active
Oh,
and
yeah.
all those.
I mean, also they watch me take injections. They have a resilience about them that is, and a maturity about them that is different than their peers because of. So I'll tell you, because I know this is a big concern a lot of women have. Will my child get diabetes? I screened both my kids a whole bunch for T1D autoantibodies through trialnet.org. They tested negative. My 10-year-old was just diagnosed last week with celiac.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And she's being such a champ about it. She's like really she wasn't super sick, but her bowel movements were just not healthy. And I knew for a few months I was like, this isn't right. But
Yeah.
I waited till her annual and I was like, I think something's not right with her digestion. And
Did they
her
just do the antibody testing for her?
for celiac.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the nurse practitioner has type 1. So, like, I never get dismissed or anything, which is so nice. And so it came back positive. We're going to do an endoscopy next week to just double confirm. But Lucy's like, she's like, does this have gluten? And does this? And I was like, that does and that doesn't. She goes, great. And I'm like, and we can go try these to swap out for that. And she's like, okay. And she just is being so cool about it. And I am then, of course, very worried that she's on the path to developing type 1, even though past autoantibody tests said she wasn't. We're going to test her again, of course. And I'm in a blessed position of knowing all these clinical trial people through my work at Diabetes Nerd. And I'm going to be on a pretty intense mission to get that kid into a couple of clinical trials if she does test positive. So, yeah.
It's I was gonna say too, so some people who have, as an adult, as you do, have celiac and you've managed your own very well. Some families end up just being pretty much gluten free in their whole house already, even though they're the only one with
Right.
celiac or some type of,
Mm-hmm.
allergy or intolerance to a particular food. They just keep it out, and so everybody else is not exposed
Yeah.
anyway. But it sounds like you pretty much do that for yourself or had, and they
Yeah,
had
because
option
I
to
mean,
do whatever.
my kids eat a lot of pot. They eat a bunch of stuff that I don't eat. Like they're obsessed with buttered pasta. I could go the rest of my life without ever eating buttered pasta. You know what I mean? And just different little kid snacks. So I did keep them gluten free until they got to preschool, just because it was easy to, right, at home.
Yep.
And then I didn't have a good reason to keep them gluten free in preschool, so I didn't. But yeah, so
You've also exposed, I mean, you brought up a good point about, will my child have type 1 or other autoimmune types of things? And from a family standpoint, knowing your family history is very valuable.
mm-hmm.
And then we both did kind of the same thing in terms of I did dairy as well, but
Hmm.
I mainly focused on like the cow's milk dairy. I know that's kind of controversial. It's like a 50-50.
Yeah.
It's like
I didn't
some
give
people
mine
claim
cow's milk, but I did use formula that had dairy in it. So
okay. Yeah.
they were getting dairy.
It's still
Yeah.
there. And we did like mostly goat's milk, sheep's milk kind
Oh,
of dairy. So
okay.
they didn't have any, I guess they were exposed, but not to cow's milk.
Yeah.
And then we
Right.
did mostly gluten-free stuff up until about the age of 2. And that was just the standpoint of that's also when I stopped nursed. And again, there is if you can and you're willing and it works, then great. And if not, there are milk banks and there's formula and there's nourishing your baby is very valuable in whatever
Yeah.
way that you can feed
I
them.
did it for as long as I could bear.
Yes.
I hated it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, they were both about 2 when I stopped nursing. And so
Hmm.
that was, I felt like it was a point of allowing my milk to be valuable in terms of just immune and whatnot while
Yeah.
they were being introduced to foods and whatever. And then it is like the more they get into play dates and going to a school or going to a daycare or whatever
Yeah.
it is, there's only so much that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like we need to do another episode that's postpartum.
Thank you very, very much. Again, if you are wanting our newest book, you can easily find it on
Amazon, for sure. With type 1 diabetes, or visit diabetesnerd.com. You can find it there too.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ginger.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast is brought to you by Integrated Diabetes Services, where experience meets expertise, passion meets compassion, and diabetes care is personal because we live it too. Our team of clinicians, all living with type 1 diabetes, understands the challenges firsthand. We're here to help no matter where you are in the world. From glucose management to self-care strategies, the latest tech, sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancy, and emotional well-being, we've got you covered. We offer consultations in English and Spanish via phone, video chat, email, and text. Want to learn more? Visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com to schedule a consultation. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Shiner, wishing you a fantastic week ahead. Don't forget to think like a